Almost all programming languages have the concept of a loop, which enables the execution of one or more statements as many times as needed. All high-level programming languages include a variety of looping constructs that can be used to continually execute one or more sentences. Hello everyone and welcome to SimpliCode's YouTube channel. Today, we'll take you through loops present in 3 different programming languages. In this tutorial, you guys will understand what loops are and the difference in loops present within different programming languages. Before we begin, let me tell you guys that we have regular updates on multiple programming videos. So if you are a programmer and want to learn something new, then consider getting subscribed to our YouTube channel and press that bell icon to never miss any updates from SimpliCode. Let's go through the agenda for this tutorial. We'll start this video by going through all the loops which are present in Python, followed by the loops present in Java and the loops which are present in JavaScript. So it is rightly said that you can master a programming language just by programming in it. I hope you guys are ready to go through the difference between loops present in Python, Java and JavaScript. So without further ado, let's start with loops in Python. Over to our training expert.
So what is a for loop in Python? A for loop in Python is used to iterate over the items or elements present in a sequence. The items present in a sequence can be in the form of a list, tuple, dictionary or even a string. A for loop in Python uses the range function to iterate over a specific number of times. Now let's have a look at the syntax of a for loop. So here on the left you can see the syntax of the for loop. So we have the for keyword followed by the iterator variable. Then we have the in keyword followed by the sequence. It can be a list, you can use the range function, it can be a dictionary, a tuple, anything. And after that you have your colon followed by the statements that you want to execute in the for loop. And below you have the rest of the code. And here on the right you can see this is the flow chart of a for loop. So you have for each item in sequence, then we check the condition. If you have reached the last item, if that is true, you exit out of the loop. But if it is false, you keep on running or executing the statements that are present inside the for loop. This will continue until and unless you have reached the last item in your sequence. Okay. Now let's head over to our Jupyter notebook where we'll see for loop in detail and we'll explore a lot of code examples. Okay, so here I am on my Jupyter notebook. Let's start by writing a simple for loop. Suppose I have a variable, say s, and it has a value which is a string, let's say Simplilearn. Okay, now the way to write a for loop is I'll say for I, which is my iterator variable. It can be any valid variable name in Python, in my variable that is s. So here s becomes my sequence. I'll say print I. So what this for loop is going to do is it will iterate over all the characters that are present in my string and print them one by one. Let me run it by hitting Shift Enter. You see here, using this for loop, we have iterated over all the letters that were present in my string that is Simplilearn, and we have printed them one by one. Okay. Now the print function in Python provides a parameter called end. So by default, the value of the parameter is \n, that is the new line character. Now you can end a print statement with any character or string using this parameter, which is end. Let me show you what I meant. So I'll again have my same string Simplilearn. I'll say for I in my variable or my sequence s. I'll say print I, comma, then I'll use my end parameter equal to, and my end parameter will have a value of asterisk. Now let me run this. You can see here this is sort of a pattern that we have printed. So between each letter in my string Simplilearn we have an asterisk. Okay. Moving ahead, Let's see how to use for loop in a list. Alright, I'll declare a list called programming, and this list will contain a few programming languages. Let's say we have Java, and then the next item we have in the list is Python. Next we have Ruby, and then we'll have HTML. Okay, so I'm going to print all the individual items that are present in my list using the for loop. So I'll use the same syntax. I'll write for. This time I'll use my iterator variable name as iter, which means iterator. For iterator or iter in my sequence, which is programming, I'll say print iter. Let's run it. You see here we have printed all the items in my list one by one: Java, Python, Ruby and HTML. Alright, now let's see an example how you can find the average of a list of numbers using for loop. So I'll give a comment saying find the average of a list of numbers. Okay, so here first of all we'll declare a list of numbers with variable list underscore num equal to, it will have a few numbers, let's say 20, 25, 10, 50 and 40. Let's make it 45. Now to find the average of a list of numbers, first I'll declare a variable called sum that will have a value of 0. So we have initialized the sum variable to 0. Then I'll start my for loop for I in my sequence, that is list underscore num, which is this variable. I'll give a colon. I'll write sum equal to sum plus I. So here just give a space to make it more readable. So I'm adding all the numbers in my list and we are storing the result in the variable sum. Then we'll say print sum equal to, I'll pass in my variable that is sum. Then I'll say print average equal to, now our average will be my variable sum divided by the length of my list that has all the numbers. Let's run this. You see here, so our total sum of all the numbers present inside the list is 150 and the average of all these numbers is 30. So 150 divided by 5 is 30. Alright. Now let's see how you can use a for loop using a tuple. So let's declare a variable called num. This is going to be a tuple of numbers, and we have 30, 45, 60, 50 and let's say 70 as the numbers inside the tuple. I'll say sum equal to 0. Then we'll have our for loop for I in my sequence, that is num. I'll say sum equal to sum plus I. So here we are just adding the values that are present inside the tuple. I'll say print sum. So here you can see we have printed all the values present inside the tuple one below the other. Now if I shift my print statement to here, you can see here this is my sum of all the numbers that are present inside the tuple. So make sure you have the current indentation. Now let's see how you can use the range function in Python. Okay, So you can use the range function to iterate over a range of values or numbers using a for loop. The way to do is I'll say for I in my function range, I'll give my first index at 1 and my second index at, or my end index at 10. So this will go from 1 till 9 and exclude the 10th index. I'll say print I. You see here, for I equal to range 1 to 10, we have printed all the numbers starting from 1 till 9. So the last index, that is 10, is exclusive in the range function. Now in the range function, you can also give a third parameter that stands for step, so that you can skip a few steps and print the next value. Let me show you what I mean. Say I write for I in range 0, which is my starting index, 10, which is my end index, and I'll have a step size of 2. Give a colon. I'll say print display values with a step size of 2. Give a comma here and my variable, that is I. Let's print it. There you go. So we have printed the values with a gap of 2. So it starts from 0, then we are jumping 2 steps and then we are printing 2, then again 2 steps, we have 4, 6 and 8. So we are skipping one value and printing the next value in my sequence ranging from 0 to 10. Alright, now let's write a program to print a table of a given number. So I'll give a comment as program to print table of a given number. Alright, so I'll pass my variable n, which is going to be a user input. So I'm using the int function, and inside the int function I'll use the input function to take the user input. I'll give my message as enter the number. I'll say for I in range from 1 till 11, I'll say multiply, which is mul here, n asterisk I. So basically what I'm doing here is I'll take a user input of the number. Let's say we want to print the table of 5. So from 1 till 10 will have the product of the numbers. Let me print it. I'll say print n comma within double quotes I'll give my asterisk comma I comma within double quotes I'll say equal to, and then we'll have our variable mul. Let's run this, enter the number, I'll give 5 and hit enter. There you go. So here we have the multiplication table of my number 5. So you say 5 into 1, which is 5, 5 into 2 is 10, then we have 5 into 7 35, 5 into 9 is 45, then our last index which ends at 10, so we have 5 into 10, that is 50. Alright, so this is how you can create a simple multiplication table using for loop in Python. Now we can also use the range function with a sequence of items. The len function can be combined with the range function to iterate through a sequence using indexing. I'll show you an example here. Let's say we have a list called list2, and here we have a list of programming languages, let's say C++. You can either use a single quote or a double quote to represent the text values in a list. The next programming language I have is Java. Then let's say I have Python, and we have R. Okay, so I can write for I in range. Here I can use the length function, and I'll say list2, give a colon, then we'll print hello, and I'll say list2 of I. So what it does is, my iterator will iterate over the list of programming languages I have here, and it will keep on iterating till the length of the list. And then I'm printing my message as hello, and it will take each item from the list using the index number. If I run it, you can see here it says hello C++, hello Java, hello Python, and hello R. Cool. Now let's see how you can use nested for loops in Python. I'll say nested for loop as my comment. Let's say I have a list of company names. My first company I have in my list is Google. Let's say Apple, PwC, and then we have Uber. So here I'll write for I in companies, I'll say print, we will display each letter of, I'll say plus I. Now I'll use my second for loop saying for letter in I will print the letter. Let's run it and see our result. There you go. So here we have used two for loops, so that becomes a nested for loop. We have my outer for loop, and then we have our inner for loop. So in the outer for loop we are just printing the name of the company. So here we say we will display each letter of plus I, which stands for my company name Google. So you can see below we have displayed each letter of Google using the inner for loop. Similarly, we have for Apple, you can see APPLE, we have PwC, and then we have Uber. So this is how you can use multiple for loops in Python. Now let's see how you can use a for loop with else clause. So I'll give a comment for loop with else clause. So I'll write for I in range 0, 10, I'll give a step size of 3. I'll say print I, and after this Python gives you the flexibility to use an else clause after the for loop. So I'll write else print the loop has completed execution. So this is my message that we are going to print after we have printed all the elements that are present inside this range function. Let's run it. You can see here we have printed the value starting from 0 with a step size of 3. So we have 0, 3, 6 until 9, and then after that we have our else block printed, which has the message the loop has completed execution. Cool. Now let me show you two more important features that you can use while writing a for loop. One is called the break statement, the other one is called the continue statement. So in Python you can break the for loop and end it before it has actually run all the elements in the iterable using the break statement. So let me show you a simple example. If I write for, just give a space here, I in range let's say from 1 to 10, I'll use an if condition saying if I equal to 6, then break and come out of the loop. Next we'll print I. So here what we are doing essentially is we are iterating over all the values from 1 to 10, and whenever the I value becomes 6, we come out of the loop and print all the values we have iterated so far. Let me run it and we'll see the result. There you go. So here our I value started from 1. We printed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then our I value reached 6. Then we used the break statement to come out of the loop. Alright. Now you can also skip the execution of further statements in the for loop during that iteration using the continue statement in Python. So when a continue statement is executed, the for loop continues with the execution of the next element in the iterable. It does not complete all the statements in the for loop body. So again I'll give a comment, say continue. Okay, so I'll write for I in range, again from 1 to 10, give a colon. I'll say if my I value is equal to 6, then I'll say continue. Then we'll print I. Let me run it and we'll see the result. Okay, so if you notice this output, so we have printed values from 1 to 5, and when my I value became 6, we skipped printing 6 and we moved on to the next element in the iterable, which was 7. Then we printed 8 and 9. So this is how you can use the break and continue statements in Python. Alright. Now we'll see a program to display the total goals a player has scored. So here we are going to iterate over a dictionary. So I'll give a comment, program to display the total goals a player has scored. Alright. So first of all, I'll declare a variable saying player name, and let's say we have the player name as Carmelo. Alright. I'll declare a dictionary called goals, and within curly braces I'll have my first player name addition. Let's say addition has scored 14 goals. Then we have, let's say, Burnett. So Burnett is my key here, and then we'll have value in terms of goals, let's say 3, and then we have our third player, let's say Carmelo, and Carmelo has scored, let's say, 7 goals. Now I'm going to write my for loop. So I'll write for my iterable name here is player, in my sequence name is goals, so I'll say goals. I'm going to check if my player is equal to player name. I'll say print the goals scored by the player. So I'll pass my dictionary name, and within square brackets I'll say player. Let's use the break statement, and then I'll say else will print. My message would be no player with that name found. Let's run and see the result. Alright, so here what we did was, initially I declared a variable called player name that had the value Carmelo, and since Carmelo was present inside my dictionary named goals, you can see here we have Carmelo who had scored 7 goals. So I iterated over my sequence goals and I checked if my iterator, that is player, is equal to the player name, which is Carmelo. Since this Carmelo is present inside my dictionary name, so we printed the goals that were scored by Carmelo, that is 7. Now let's say I change this player name to, we have, let's say, Messi. Now since Messi is not present inside my dictionary goals, if I run this, it will print no player with that name found. The reason being, Messi is not present inside my dictionary called goals. Cool. Now we'll see two more examples. This time we are going to print the cube of numbers using for loop. Alright, so first of all I'll declare a list which will have a list of numbers, let's say 2, 5, 7, 4, 8 and let's say 6. Then I'll pass in a empty list, so I'll declare within empty square brackets. I'll say for I in my sequence name, that is num, I'm going to use my empty list cube and then followed by the append function. And inside the append function we'll have our cubes of the number, so I'll write I'll use the double asterisk operator and then I'll say 3. After that we are going to print my list name, that is cube. Let's run it. There you go. So you can see here, first we have the list of the numbers here, and then we have printed the cubes of these numbers in a pattern. Let's say I bring this print statement here and I'll run it again. Now this is much more readable. You have 2 cube is 8, 5 cube is 125, 7 cube is 343, then 4 cube is 64, 8 cube is 512, 6 cube is 216. Alright, now coming to the last example in our demo section of this for loops in Python video, we'll write a program to print a pattern. I'll say pattern printing. Alright, so we are going to print a right angle triangle. For that I'm going to take my first variable called n, which is going to be a user input to enter the number of rows. So using the input function I am passing the message enter the number of rows. I'll say for I in range 0 till my user input n, give a colon. I'll use my inner for loop. This is going to be the number of columns, so I'll say for j in range 0 comma I plus 1, give a colon, and I'll print my star pattern, so I'm using asterisks, and I'll use my end parameter. I'll have my double quotations and then we'll say print the pattern. So here what I'm doing is I'm taking the number of rows from the user and I'm iterating from 0 till n, which is my user input, and then we are assigning another for loop for the number of rows, so that ranges from 0 till I plus 1. Then I'm printing my star. Let's run it and see the output. Let's say I'll enter the number of rows as 6. If I hit enter, you can see here we have our right angle triangle printed here. So initially my I value is 0. So here my j value becomes from 0 till 1. So we have just 1 star printed. In the next iteration my I value becomes 1. So from 0 to 1 plus 1, that is 2, we have 2 stars printed. The next iteration my I value becomes 2, so 2 plus 1 is 3 again. So we have 3 columns here, so 3 stars printed, so on and so forth. Alright.
If getting your learning started is half the battle, what if you could do that for free? Visit SkillUp by Simplilearn. Click on the link in the description to know more.
So what is a while loop in Python? A while loop specifies a condition or a block of code that is to be executed until the condition evaluates to false, or the loop is explicitly ended with a break statement. Moving on to the next slide. So here you can see the syntax of a while loop. So a while loop is defined using the while keyword, and then you have the expression followed by a colon. After that you have the statements inside the block. The statements are executed until the condition evaluates to false. Now on the right side you can see the flow chart to show all the steps to execute a while loop. So you can see here we have the test expression. If the test expression evaluates to true, then we execute the statements that are present inside the while block. But if the condition is false, we will exit out of the while loop. Now before I move on, I have a question for you. So here is a Python quiz question. I want you to tell me the output of the below code. So this is regarding a list. I have declared a list called alpha that has D, F and C as its elements. Then I'm saying alpha plus equal to KA, which is again a string since it is within the single quotes. Then I'm printing the list. Now you need to tell me what is the right answer. You have 4 options here, A, B, C and D. The first option is D, F, C, KA combined. Then we have KA in the beginning of the list followed by DFC. The third option or the C option is DFC KA, KA being individual elements, and the last option, the D option, is KA DFC. Please go ahead and solve this question and put your answers in the comment section of the video. We'll be more than happy to know from you. Alright, now let's go ahead and start with our demo. So here I am on my Jupyter notebook. Let me rename my file. I'll say while loop in Python demo. Okay, so let me start by writing a simple while loop. I'll declare a variable called I equal to 0. Then I'll start with my while loop. I'll write my while keyword and this will run till my I is less than 10, let's say. I'll give a colon, and if I hit enter it will come to the next line. You can see the indentation here which is being maintained. I'll say I equal to I plus 1. So I am incrementing my I value. Then I'll say print I, and I'll use my end parameter, and I'll say end within single quotes. I'll say hash and give a space. Then let me say print again. So here my while loop will run until my I value is less than 10. So we are continuously incrementing the I value and printing the I value. Let me run it. There you go. You can see the result here. We have printed the I values starting from 1 till 10, and after that we have come out of the loop. And you can see the hash symbol being used here because we used our end parameter as hash. So by default it is a new line character, but we have explicitly defined our end parameter as hash followed by a space. Cool. Now let's move on to our next example in this video on while loop. I'll define a variable called count and I'll assign a value 0. I'll say while my count is less than equal to 5. I'll give a colon. come to the next line and I'll print the condition is true, and then I'll say count equal to count plus 1, and then I'll say print end of loop. Let's run and see our result. You can see here we have printed our message. The condition is true 5 times because our expression is being evaluated 5 times here. In the 6th time, our count is no more less than equal to 5, so we end the loop, and here you can see the message end of loop. Cool. Now moving ahead, you can also use the break statement in a while loop. Let me show you how to do it. I'll say while true, so I am declaring my while loop to be true, and I'll say please type your name, and I'm going to take my name as input from the user, so I am specifying the input function. I'm going to check if my name is equal to let's say Gilly. Then I should give a colon here. I'll break out of the loop and then will print thank you, you typed the correct name. Alright, so what I am doing here is I'm going to run this loop till the user enters the correct name. So I have declared my name as Gilly. If you enter any other name apart from Gilly, this while loop will continue to run and execute. Let's run it. Okay, so here it says please enter your name. Let's say John. If I run it, it is again asking me please enter your name. Let's say this time I'll say Amy. You can see here it is again asking for the name, so I'll enter my name. Let's say Hopkins. Again, our entered username doesn't match the name that we have provided in the code. Let's say this time I'll say Gilly. If I hit enter, you can see we have our message, thank you, you typed the correct name. Okay. Now moving on to the next example, we will see how to find the least common multiple of 4 and 7. So I'll give a comment as LCM of 4 and 7. Now you would know it is 28, but we are going to find out with the help of a Python while loop. So first I'll declare a variable x equal to 0. I'll say while my expression is true, I'm going to increment my x value to 1. I'll say x plus equal to 1. This means x equal to x plus 1. I'm going to use an if statement and say if not, and here we'll pass the condition x percentage 4 or modulo 4 or x percentage 7, then I'll say break. Finally, we'll print our message saying x, comma, and I'll say is divisible by 4 and 7. Say both 4 and 7. Okay, so what I am doing here is I am taking my expression while true, I'm incrementing the value of x each time and checking if this is true or not. Now at the first instance, when my number x is divisible by both 4 and 7, I am coming out of the loop, and we are going to print this. Now let's see what's the answer. There you go. You can see here 28 is divisible by both 4 and 7, and hence the LCM of 4 and 7 is 28. So this is the least number which is divisible by 4 and 7. Alright. Now you can also use the continue statement. How you use the break statement to come out of the loop, you can also use the continue statement to continue running the loop. So I'll say I equal to 0 while I is less than 10. So this is my expression. My loop is going to run until I is less than 10. I'm going to increment the value of I. I'll say I plus equal to 1 if, let's say I set my condition, if I equal to let's say 6, then I'll say continue my execution and skip the current step where I value becomes 6. Then I'll say print I. Let's run it and see the result. Okay, you can see here we have printed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here you can see we have skipped the execution where I value became 6 and continued with the next iteration 7, 8, 9 and 10. So this is how you can use the continue statement and the break statement in a while loop. Alright. Now moving ahead, you can also use the else statement in a while loop. Now let me show you how to do it. I'll say I equal to 1, then I'll write while I is less than, let's say 5. I'll say print I, then I'm going to increment the value to I plus equal to 1. Now here you can use the else statement and say print I is not less than 5. Let's run it. You can see here we ran our loop until I value was less than 5. So we printed 1, 2, 3 and 4. When I value became 5, we printed I value is not less than 5. Cool. Now moving ahead, so you can use inbuilt functions inside a while loop. Let me show you how to use the pop function and remove the elements in a list using a while loop. So I'll declare a list of numbers, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4 and we have 5. So these are the 5 elements that are present inside list A. I'll say while A, so I'm iterating over all the elements in my list. I'm going to say print A dot, I'll use the pop function. So what pop does is it is going to remove the elements from the end of a list. Then I'll say else print there are no elements left in the list. Alright, let's run it and see the result. You can see here we are removing the elements one by one from the end of the list. So first we popped out 5, then 4, 3, 2 and 1, and after that we had no more elements left in the list, so we printed there are no elements left in the list. Okay. Now the next program, we will take numbers as input from the user and calculate the average as long as the user enters a positive number. So I'll give a comment, average of positive numbers. Cool. Okay. So I'll start my program. I'll declare a variable called num which has a value 0. I'll declare a variable called count which also has a value 0. Then I have sum which has a value of 0. I'll write while my number is greater than equal to 0. So this condition is for accepting only positive numbers. I'll say num equal to, I'm going to take the positive numbers from the user, so I'll pass an input function. I'll say enter any positive number. Then I'm going to say if my number is greater than 0, I'll say count equal to count plus 1. Let's make this greater than equal to 0. Then I'll say sum equal to sum plus my number. So here I am keeping track of the numbers that we have entered, and here we are calculating this sum, that is the cumulative sum. Then I'll say AVG, which is to find the average. I'll say sum divided by my variable, that is count. Then I'm going to print total. I'll say total sum of numbers, give a colon followed by a space, give a comma, I'll say sum, then I'll say average, give a colon followed by a space, and I'll pass in the variable avg. Alright, so here I have my program ready, where we are using a while loop and an if statement to take numbers as input from the user and calculate the average as long as the user enters a positive number. So let me run it. Okay, it says enter a positive number. I'll say, let's say 5. Again it's asking for a positive number. I'll say 7. Let's say 10. And this time I'm going to enter a negative number, so I'll say minus 6. If I run it, you can see here the total sum of numbers 5 plus 7 plus 10 is 22, and the average is 22 divided by 3, which is 7.33. Alright, let me give a space here for more readability. We are going to try it again. I'll say 40, 50, 30, and let's say 100. This time I'll enter a negative number, let's say minus 90. Okay, so you can see here I have entered 4 positive numbers, 40, 50, 30 and 100. So the sum of numbers is 220, and the average is 40 plus 50 plus 30 plus 100, which is 220 divided by 4, which is 55. Cool. Now moving on to the last demo in this while loop with Python tutorial. So here we are going to guess a number. So the user is going to give a number between a certain range, and based on a random input generated from the program, we are going to guess the random number. Alright, so for that I'm going to start by importing my library called random. I'm going to say n equal to random dot randint, which is a function to generate random integers. I want to generate between 1 and 100. Let's go ahead and print that number n. Then I'll use a variable called guess, which is going to be a user input. So I'll say input, which is my function, and I'll give the message enter an integer between 1 to, let's say, 100. Okay. Then I'll start my while loop saying while n not equal to my variable that is guess, I'll say if my guessed number is less than n, I'll print the message as your guess is, let's say, low. Then again I'll say guess equal to, I'll take the user input, I'll just copy this message and we'll print it here. Okay, now I'll say elif if my guess is more than my random integer, will print, I'll just copy this, we are going to print your guess is, let's say, high. Then we are again going to ask the user to guess a number between 1 to 100, and after that I'll say else will print you guessed it correctly. Then we'll break out of the loop and finally I'll just print it. Okay, so what we are doing in this game is, before that let me just give a comment as guessing game in Python. So first of all, we are generating a random integer using the library called random. So the integer will lie between 1 and 100. I am going to print that integer. After that I am taking a user input. So I'm asking the user to enter an integer between 1 to 100 and I'm checking if my random integer is not equal to my user input, that is guess, and if that guess is less than my random integer, I am going to print your guess is low. Then I'm again asking the user to input an integer between 1 to 100. Then I'm saying if the guessed value is more than the generated random integer, will print your guess is high. Then after that I'm again asking the user to input an integer, and in case the random integer matches with the guessed number, will print you guessed it correctly. Alright, let's try this out. Okay, so here you can see, so my program generated a random integer 48 that lies between 1 and 100. So our loop will only stop executing when we enter our number as 48. Otherwise it will keep on running and asking you to enter an integer. Let's say I enter 50. You see here your guessed value, that is 50, is more than the random integer 48. So we have the message your guess is high. Let's say I'll say 30. This time my guess is low, you can see it here. Let's say I'll take my number as 300. You see here, this time my guess is high, which is more than 48. But if I say my user input to be 48 and if I hit enter, there you go. We have our message printed, you guessed it correctly. Alright.
Choose from over 300 in-demand skills and get access to 1,000 plus hours of video content for free. Visit SkillUp by Simplilearn. Click on the link in the description to know more.
What is a nested loop? Python programming language allows you to use one loop inside another loop. This is known as a nested loop. It is present inside the body of the outer loop. The inner or outer loop can be a for loop or a while loop. The outer for loop can contain a while loop, or an outer while loop can contain a for loop inside it. In Python nested loops, the outer loop can have more than one inner loop. There is no limitation on the chaining of loops. Now you can see on your screens the basic syntax of writing a nested loop in Python. You have the outer loop followed by the inner loop and the statements inside the inner loop, and finally you have the statements of the outer loop. The last three lines consist of the body of the outer loop. Now talking about the various ways of writing nested loops in Python. So with Python you can write a for loop inside another for loop, or you can have a while loop declared inside another while loop. You can see it here. So using Python you can use both for loops and while loops together. The outer loop can be a for loop and the inner loop can be a while loop. You can also write nested loops having a while loop outside and for loop inside. So now that you have learnt about the basics of nested loops, let's look at an example of printing patterns. So in the code here, we have used two for loops to get our right angle triangle containing asterisks or stars. So we have declared row equal to 7, which means we need 7 rows to be printed. You can count it here. These are 7 rows. Hence we have defined it as row equal to 7. Now the outer for loop ensures we have a total of 7 rows. So we have defined a range from 1 to row plus 1, that is 8. Now the inner loop is the total number of columns in each row. So for each iteration of the outer loop, the columns count gets incremented by 1. So for the first iteration of the outer loop, the column count is 1. In the next iteration it is 2, and so on. The inner loop iteration is equal to the count of the columns, and for each iteration in an inner loop we print a star. So for the first iteration, when I value is 0, it will first print a blank. When I value becomes 1, then your j range becomes 1, 1 plus 1, which is 2. So it will print 1 star here followed by a space. When I value becomes 2, your j range becomes 1, 3. So it will print 2 stars. Then again when I value becomes 3, your range becomes 1, 4. So it will print 3 stars. So on and so forth. Now let's see when you should use a nested loop in Python. So nested loops are mostly used to work with multi-dimensional data structures, such as printing two-dimensional arrays, iterating a list that contains a nested list, etc. You can use Python nested loops to print different star or number patterns as well. Now let's head to our Jupyter notebook to do some practical hands-on demonstrations to understand nested loops in Python better. Okay, you can see here I am on my Jupyter notebook. First of all, I'll rename my notebook as nested loops in Python demo. Click on rename. Alright, now let's see our first example. So here we are going to print the items in a list one by one, but each letter in an item should be separated by the @ sign, which is basically the @ symbol that you use in your email IDs. Alright, and for the first demo we'll be using nested for loop. So let's start. I'll create a list which will have the names of the fruits. Let's say we have mango. I'll give a comma. Let's say I have apple, grapes, and let's say we have banana. Alright, now I'll create my outer loop. So I'll say for fruit. Now this variable can be any valid Python variable. This is basically known as an iterator or an iterator variable. So I'll say for fruit in my list, which is list underscore fruits that I have declared in my first line. I'll give a colon and then declare my inner loop. I'll say for I in my variable or the iterator that I had declared in the previous line, which is fruit. I'll say print I and then I'll use the end parameter that will have the @ sign, and then I'll print a blank. So this is my first nested loop that I have created. So I want to iterate through all the items present in my list underscore fruits variable, and for each item in the list I want to make sure that each letter in an item should be separated with the @ sign. So let me go ahead and print it so that you can see the result. There you go. So here you can see we have printed the different items that were present in my list, which was list underscore fruits, and for each item the letters in the item have been separated by the @ sign, you can see here. Alright, if you want you can change this symbol to, let's say, star. If I print it, you can see the difference in the result. Now we'll see our second example where we are going to print the values of items in two lists together. So let me create a list called color that will have the different colors such as red, we have green, and let's say blue. And the next list I'm going to create will have three items. The first item is apple, then we have veggies, and then we have shirt. Now to print the values of the items in these two lists together, I'm going to use two for loops again. So I'll say for my iterator variable, let's say x, in my first list, which is color. So I have declared my outer loop, and now I'll say for another iterator variable, let's say y, in my second list items, I'm going to print x comma y, and after that we'll print a space. So first of all, my outer for loop will iterate through the items that are present inside color list, and for each color we are going to iterate through the values that are present inside items list. Now let me go ahead and print it. You can see it here. First we are printing red apple, red veggies, and red shirt. Then we have green apple, green veggies, and green shirt. If I scroll down, you can see blue apple, blue veggies, and blue shirt. Okay. Now coming to our third example, here we are going to print a right angled triangle with 10 rows. We have seen a similar example in the slides where there were 7 rows. Now we are going to print a right angled triangle with 10 rows. I'll give a comment. Let's say print right triangle. Okay. So I'll start my for loop. I'll say for any iterator variable, let's say I, in range. I'll pass my range as 11, so it will go from 0 to 10. Then I'll say for j in range I, so this will take the number of columns. I'll say print within double quotes. I'll give my star because I want to print a star pattern for the triangle, and I'll end with a space. Then I'll say print blank, so there won't be any space between the different rows. Now let's print the result. There you go. So here you can see we have a right angle triangle of 10 rows. You can count the number of rows, and also we have the number of columns as 10. So when I value is 1, your G range also becomes 1, so we'll print 1 star. Then when I value is 2, we are going to print 2 stars. When I value is 3, we are going to print 3 stars. And we are using the end parameter as a space. Okay. Now let's go ahead and print a right angle triangle using a nested while loop. So unlike the for loop, the while loop doesn't have a pre-compiled iterable sequence. The while loop keeps executing the code until the expression evaluates to true. So I'll start with the variable I equal to 11 because I want to print 10 rows that will contain my star pattern. Now I'll declare my first while loop. I'll say while I is greater than 0. So my loop will continue until I is greater than 0. I'll say j equal to 11. Then I'll use my inner while loop. I'll say while j is greater than I will print star, and I'll use my end parameter as space again. Then we are going to decrement j by 1. I'll come out of the inner while loop and I'll say I equal to I minus 1. So we are also decrementing the first variable I by 1, and now I'll say print. Okay. So let me run this. You can see it here. We have the same pattern printed. Earlier we saw this using 2 for loops, and now we have created the same pattern using 2 while loops. Alright. Now moving to our next example where we'll see how to append 2 lists. So first of all, I'm going to declare list 1 and list 2, and we are going to append the elements of both the list into an empty list called result. So I'll give a comment append 2 lists. Okay. So first I'll declare my list 1. Now these are list of numbers. Let's say I have 10, 25 and 30 as my elements in the first list, and then I'll declare my second list which will have, let's say, 60, 15 and 50. Okay. Now I'll declare an empty list called result, and after that I'm going to start my outer for loop. I'll say for I in my list 1, then I'll say for j in list 2, I'll say result, which is my empty list that I have declared. Then I'm going to use the append function that is inbuilt in Python. I'll say I plus j. So this will make sure we'll append the values from both the list into my empty list, which is result. Then I'll say print result. Okay, let's run it. There you go. So what we are doing here is I am adding each element in list 1 with all the elements in list 2. If you see here, 10 plus 60 is 70, then we have 10 plus 15 which is 25, 10 plus 50 is 60. Similarly, 25 plus 60 is 85, 25 plus 15 is 40, then 25 plus 50 is 75, and similarly for 30 plus 60, 30 plus 15 and 30 plus 50. Great. Now moving to our next example, we are going to see how you can multiply the values in 2 lists. So I'll give a comment saying multiplying 2 lists. I'll declare my first list, which is list 1 with 2, 4 and let's say 6. Then I'll have my list 2 with the same elements 2, 4 and 6. Start my outer for loop for I in list 1. Then I'll say for j in list 2, I'm going to show you another feature that you can use while implementing nested lists, that is to use continue or break. So I'll say if I equal to j, then I'll continue. After that, we are going to print the value of I followed by the asterisk, then the value of j. I'll give a comma, then within single quotes I'll say equal to, then I'll give the operation I multiplied by j. So this is how you can multiply the elements in two lists. So I've declared my list 1, my list 2, then I'm using two for loops, and whenever my I value is equal to j, we'll skip that step and move on to the next iteration. Let me run it and show you the result. So if you notice here, I haven't multiplied 2 and 2. The reason being, I have used this if condition. Whenever I was equal to j, we continued with the next iteration. Similarly, there is no output for 4 multiplied by 4 or 6 multiplied by 6. But for the remaining, we have our result. 2 multiplied by 4 is 8. 2 multiplied by 6 is 12. Similarly, 4 multiplied by 2 is 8. 4 multiplied by 6 is 24. 6 multiplied by 2 is 12. And 6 multiplied by 4 is 24. So continue and break are two statements that you can use inside nested loops in Python. Okay, now we are going to write another nested loop using a while loop and a for loop to check whether a number is a perfect number or not. So basically in this program we are going to print the perfect numbers between 1 and 100. Now a perfect number is a positive integer that is equal to the sum of its proper divisors. So the smallest perfect number is 6, which is the sum of 1, 2 and 3. So these are the perfect divisors of, or proper divisors of 6, 1, 2 and 3. If you add them, the value is 6. Another example is 28. The proper divisors of 28 are 1, then you have 2, 4, 7 and 14. If you add them, the value is 28. So here we will iterate the first 100 numbers using a while loop. So for each iteration of the outer while loop, the inner for loop executes from 1 up to the current outer number to check if the current number is a perfect number or not. Okay, so I'll give a comment saying perfect number. Cool. So I'll first declare a variable called a, which will have a value of 1. Then I'll say while my a is less than equal to 100, then I'll declare another variable called y_sum, which will have the value of 0. After that, I'll pass in my inner loop, which is the for loop. I'll say for I in range 1, a. I'll say if a mod I is equal to 0, then we'll say y_sum equal to y_sum plus I. Then I'm going to say if my y_sum value is equal to my a value, then it's a perfect number. So I'm going to use a print statement saying print perfect number, give a colon, then I'll give a comma and print my variable a, And finally, we are going to increment the value of a to 1. Now let's run it. You can see it here. Between 1 and 100, we have two perfect numbers, as I mentioned earlier, 6 and 28. Okay. Now coming to the final example in our demo on nested loops in Python, here we are going to print each element in the list 5 times. So I'll first declare my list, let's say fruits, which has apple, then we have orange, and let's say we have kiwi. So I'll say for an iterator fruit in fruits, I'll declare a variable called count and initialize it to 0. Then I'm going to use a while loop saying while count is less than 6, since I want to print the items in the list 5 times. Then I'll say print fruit, and I'll use my end parameter as a space. Then we are going to increment count by 1, and finally I'll print it. Let's run it. You can see it here. I printed each element in my list fruits 5 times. You can see it here.
So first of all, understand why do we need loop statements? So generally, whenever you are dealing with some data structures in Java, which can store multiple elements, for example, we saw array, which can store multiple elements. String is also basically technically a character array, which is storing multiple characters. So whenever you have these kind of data structures where you have multiple elements being stored in the same, then in that case, you would like to have a way to iterate or access all of the elements in a seamless fashion. One of the ways is to access them individually one by one, but that's too much of work. That's too much of code. There has to be a simpler way of accessing all the elements one by one if I want to. And that's where the majority of the use cases for using loops coming to picture. Now, Java provides multiple constructs to write loops in Java. There is a while loop, there is a do while loop, there is a for loop, there is also an enhanced for loop. And in the previous versions of Java, a use case of iterator was also very popular. So there are multiple ways in which you can actually iterate over a collection and access all the elements of the collection one by one. And you can use it to multiple useful cases. For example, if you have a huge array of employee salary and you want to give bonus to each of the employees and add the bonus to the salary, then you need to do this addition for all the employees. It would be nice to have to return a while loop, and the while loop can automatically access all the employee salary one by one and keep adding the bonus to the salary. This would be an easier way to do this rather than individually updating each employee's salary. And the first loop statement we are going to understand is a while loop. So the syntax of while loop is very straightforward. You write the while keyword, you enter the actual condition which will be evaluating to a Boolean true or false. So you write the expression which will be a Boolean expression, exactly similar to the conditions which you use to write in your if statements. So you write your condition which will evaluate to either true or false, and then you write your statement. And these statements will keep executing till the time this particular expression evaluates to true. So generally the way it works is that it will enter the while block, it will evaluate the expression. If the expression becomes true, then the statements inside this particular while block will be executed. And after the execution of the statement, it will again go back, again evaluate the expression. We call them steps basically. So it will go to the next step, again evaluate the expression. If this still holds true, it will again go inside, execute the statement, move on to the next step. It will again go to the evaluation. So this loop will continue to go till the time this condition will hold true. If it still doesn't make sense for you, don't worry, we will have a demo of it to make you understand how to use the while loops. And maybe it's a good idea to switch to the IDE and look at an example of it. So I have already created while demo for it. Here it is. It looks very small and simple, but it will get to the point where we can understand how and why will we be using the while loops. So I've created a while demo class. I've added a public static void main method here, which is the entry point. I have declared a variable which is int count equal to 1. So the count value is 1 right now. And then I'm writing a condition here. I'm saying while count is less than 10, do this. So it will print the current value of count. And after that, I'm using the post increment unary operator. If you remember, we covered this in the previous sessions. What is the meaning of this? It basically will increment the value of count by 1. This expression is equivalent to if I write it in this way. If I write count equal to count plus 1. This is exactly the same as this, no difference. So this will have the same impact. I will just remove this line because we already have the count plus plus here. So if we try to understand this, we are basically incrementing the count and then checking the condition again. So at first time, it will be 1 less than 10. Yes, that is true. It will go inside and print the count value, the current count value, which will be 1. And then it does count plus plus. So now the count value becomes 2. It will again go back here, again check the condition saying is 2 less than 10? Yes, that is true. So the while condition again becomes true. It will again go inside this, print the current value of count, which is 2, then do count plus plus. So it will again increment the value of count. So now the count value becomes 3. Again, go back here at condition and saying is 3 less than 10? Yes, that is still true. Again, come here, print the 3. Again, go here, make count as 4. 4 less than 10, prints 4. Again, count plus plus, count becomes 5, and so on and so forth. It will keep doing that till the value becomes 10. So at a step when count plus plus results in the count value being updated to 10, it will go here and say is 10 less than 10? Now that is not true because 10 is equal to 10, but 10 is not less than 10. So this condition will become false and it will exit of this while loop and it will come here and it will execute if there was anything written after the while loop that will be executed. So that's the idea, that you want to do something till a particular condition holds true. Then you can use the while loop, define your condition and execute the statements and try to do something which changes the state of this condition. Here I'm changing the count so that every time a new evaluation happens. If I comment this will result in an infinite loop because 1 will always be less than 10. I will not be incrementing the count here and it will keep running forever. It will never stop. It will just keep printing 1, 1, 1 every time till your computer program runs out of the memory. So always remember not to end up into an infinite loop. That's probably one of the biggest mistakes any beginner programmer does. So please try to be aware of that particular loophole, not try to run an infinite loop. Always try to write something in the code block which can change the state of the condition, and also make sure that that state condition sometime should become false. You should also make sure that always becomes false, because if I do this, then this condition will always remain true because it is already 1, then it will become 0, then it will become -1, -2, -3, so on and so forth. But that value of count will forever be less than 10. And again, you will never be able to exit this loop. Your program will be stuck in this loop till your program runs out of the memory. So always remember to write a statement or a statement of execution in your code block, which can change the state of the condition, which results in some eventual time when this condition becomes false. This condition has to become false eventually, otherwise you will never come out of the loop. Always remember that. So if we run this program now, let's observe the output. So we can see here this particular statement is printed for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that's it. After 9, the moment the count plus plus resulted into the count value becoming 10, it checked that condition and then it just came out of the loop because 10 is not less than 10 and the condition became false. So always do something inside your code block which results at least of one scenario where this condition becomes false. And that is how you can use the while loop. Now you can see this is a pretty generic code and you can write any kind of condition here, write any code you want to execute here, and then do something to change the state of the condition as well in a positive way, in a way which results this particular condition to be false at some point of time. And then your while loop will run fine. So this is all I wanted to cover in terms of the while loop. Hello guys, let's get started with today's topic, which is about how to use do while loops. So let's understand when do we need that and how do you actually use that. Let me switch to the Java documentation and if I can find some syntax of it as well. Yep. So as you can see here, if I just highlight this portion, this is how you actually write a do while statement block. So you write do, you start a code block, you write some executable statements, and then after the code block ends, you write a while expression and end it with semicolon. This is the syntax basically. It starts with do or curly braces, some executable statements, a while block or a while statement basically with an expression ending with a semicolon. Let's understand this with the help of a program to understand the structure better. So for this, I have created a sample program here, which is called do while demo. Again, having a public static void main method, and it has a variable which is count, and it is initialized as 1. Then I write do, I write this code block or the curly braces, and then I am just printing the value of count. Then I am incrementing the value of count, and then I am writing a condition which says while count is less than 10 and semicolon. If you compare this with the previous demo we ran, if I just put them side by side, we had while condition statement and the state change condition. Here we have do statement, condition change statement, and then we check the condition at the end. So the idea is that if you have a use case where before you even evaluate the condition, you want to print something, even before you evaluate the condition, if you want to do something, in that case, you will use the do while loop. Even before the actual while loop starts, if you want to execute a statement, you will use do while loop. For example, if you want to print the initial value of the count even before the condition checks, then you can use do while loop. If that is not your use case, you can use a simple while loop, which is described here in this program. So coming back to the do while, so I say do, and then I'm saying print this particular statement without checking anything. This condition will be executed for the first time without any condition check at all. This will just work as is, like a normal Java statement. After that, I'm incrementing the value of the count, and then I'm checking the condition. So remember, when this particular condition is being checked, the first increment has already happened. But in the while case, we did the comparison before even the first increment. The first comparison happened with the original value of count. But here, the first comparison is happening with the incremented value of the count. Hope you get the difference in a better context now, that you will use this when you want to write some initialization code before you actually hit the condition. So this condition will be evaluated with 2 less than 10, and then the value will be printed. Let's print this example, and we'll also try to play around with this example a bit more to build our understanding better. If I run this program, there is no difference in output if you compare this with the previous program we ran for the while. So it prints the count value. So this is coming here. Then it increments the value. Then it checks the condition saying is 2 less than 10. Yes, that holds true. If that holds true, it will go back to statement number 9, again print this, again do an increment on the count, and again check the condition with the updated value of the count, which will say 3 less than 10 now. Similarly, print the value, increment, check. This will continue to happen till this particular condition becomes false. And once this condition is false, it will exit out of this whole do while loop, and it will go to the line number 12. And if you have any statement written there, you can that statement will be executed in this case. So let's try to change some values here, and let's see if we can make sense of this program if we change the value. Let's see if I put 11 here, what will happen now? Let's run this program. You will say now you will see that this particular output is displayed which says count is 11. So what happened here, that count was 11, it entered the do while block, it went to this particular statement which said count is 11, then it incremented the value, so the value became 12, and obviously 12 is not less than 10, so it did not print it again. It only printed once, even if the first time the condition was checked, the first condition execution itself resulted in false. Still, line number 9 got successfully printed, and that's the whole idea behind using the do while. What if I change this value to 10? Let's see what happens. And after that, we'll run one more combination to just make it more interesting. This time again, count is 10. Line number 10 will be printed as count is 10. Then at line number 10, the count is incremented to 11 and 11 is not less than 10. So in this case, the loop ends and it will move out. Now, what happens if I do this? If I say less than equal to here, let's run this program and interpret the output. Now, again, only one statement is printed because in this case, the count is 10, 10 is printed here, and we are saying 10 plus 1, 11. 11 is still not less than equal to 10. And that's why the loop just exits. Let's make it 9 and see what happens. Now you see two values. So count is 9. It enters the do while loop, goes to statement number 9, prints the current value of count, which is 9, then increments the value to 10. Then at line number 11, this while statement is executed and the condition is checked. Is 10 less than equal to 10? Yes. 10 is not less than, but 10 is equal to 10. So this condition will hold true. It will go back here, print count is 10, make count 11, again check the condition, is 11 less than equal to 10? No, it's not. And then the condition will return to false and loop will be exited. So hope this will give you a better understanding now, since we ran different permutations and combinations of the values and we saw when this will be executed and when this will not be executed. But the bottom line is very straightforward, that whenever you want to write some pre-processing logic, even before checking the very first condition of your loop, then in that case, you will be using a do while loop. Otherwise, a normal while loop or a for loop will absolutely work fine. Hello guys, let's get started with today's topic, which is about for loops in Java. So far we covered about while loops and do while loops. And we also saw different examples of using different types of data structures like arrays. But one of the core requirements whenever you are working with any kind of collection is to iterate over it. Exactly similar to what I explained in the do while and while lectures, that you would often require to iterate over a collection or a data structure. And for that, one of the most sophisticated and easiest way to do that is using for loops. So let's understand the syntax of for loop first, and then we will also look at an example of it in the Eclipse IDE. So I have just opened the official Java docs here. So if you see, this is basically the syntax of a for loop statement. So let's understand it, and let's also try to compare it with a while loop so that we can understand how it compares with the while loop. So if we see the syntax, we first see the term initialization, then we see the term termination, and then we see the term called increment. Now, if I try to compare it with a while loop, there also you basically did these three things. You first initialized a variable outside the while loop, which is called initialization, and then you wrote a condition, which is your termination condition. You wrote a condition saying, let's say, while I is greater than 10 or while I is less than 10. So that is the condition, which is also the termination statement. The loop will continue to execute till that condition evaluates to false, and that's when the loop terminates. That's why we call it as termination. And then the third piece of it is the increment, the I++, which we used to do in the while loops. So these three portions together make or constitute any kind of loop in any kind of programming language. And for loop, if you see, the kind of code which you use to write in a while loop in multiple lines, where you first initialize a variable, then you write a condition in the while block, and then inside the while block, you use to increment the variable. All of that can be done in a single line in the for loop. And that's why I said it is the most sophisticated and easiest way to write loops in Java. So you write all of these three things, the initialization, the condition, and the increment or decrement values in the single line. And then you start with the curly braces and you write the code which you want to keep executing till the condition evaluates to false. That's the basic syntax of it. So let us try to understand this with the help of an example. So here I have opened a class which is called for demo. And this is a class which will demonstrate the usage of a for loop. So again, we have a public static void main method, which you can see here, which is the entry point. And then I use the keyword for. I put standard braces or the brackets. and then I do the initialization. So this part is the initialization part. You initialize the variable. So I just say int I equal to 1, initialization done. You end it with a semicolon so that it is a single statement understood by Java. And then you write this condition, which is your evaluation / termination condition. So this condition is basically the deciding factor of how long your loops should run. It's exactly similar to what you used to write in the while block. If I just show you the example, this is what we used to do. So we did the initialization at line number 7. Then we wrote this termination condition inside the while syntax or the construct. And then we did the increment here. So we are doing all of these 3 steps, but we are doing it in a single line. So this is the condition, and then we write our increment or decrement values, which are going to change the evaluation condition every time at every step. So we are saying I++. So technically what I am saying here is that start with I equal to 1 and then check the condition I less than 10. So in the first step, it will be checking if 1 is less than 10. If the condition holds true, go inside the for loop, execute the statement at line number 7, and then go back to this particular statement. So we do I++. So I becomes 2, and then you again go back to the condition. And again you check if 2 is less than 10. Yes, it is. So again you go inside the for loop and do whatever is written there. There can be multiple statements here. For now, I have just written one system.out.println. So that happens. And once all the execution is finished inside the block, it will again go back to the increment. Does the increment, so 2 plus 1 becomes 3. Again does the evaluation. And if the condition holds true, it will again go inside. So this will continue. This condition checking, execution, and increment will continue till the time this condition holds true. The moment this condition becomes false, the control will come out at line number 9. So that's the basic anatomy and control flow. It's very important to understand the control flow of a for loop. Otherwise, you might end up into a program which is forever running and which will just eat up all the memory available in your JVM. So be very sure of what you write in your for loop. Be very sure of especially these 2 parts, the condition and the increment or decrement. So this is very important piece. The initialization happens only once, and then this condition evaluates. If the condition holds to true, some code executes, goes back to the changing statement, which can be an increment, decrement, whatever, and again compares the updated value with the condition. So this will keep happening. Let's run this code to interpret the output. So I will right click, go to run as Java application. And if I interpret the output here, I can see that it started with count is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. It stopped at 9. So what happened there? Let's try to evaluate the termination condition. So let's say I has become 9 and 9 is less than 10. So it goes inside and it prints count is 9, which is I. Then it goes here and it says 9 plus 1. I++ means 9 plus 1, the current value of I plus 1. It becomes 10, and then it again compares the condition. So now 10 is not less than 10. 10 is equal to 10, but it is not less than 10. So the condition becomes false, and count is 10 is never printed because this condition has become false. It will jump out. So let's say if I do this, if I put an equal to here, and if I now execute the same program, this time I will see 10 here. And because I have said that, okay, check the condition, if 10 is less than or equal to 10, that will become true. It will print count is 10. Then it will increment and the count will become 11. The I will become 11. And then it will check 11 is less than or equal to 10. No, it is not. So condition becomes false and the control comes out of the loop. So that's how you should always try to interpret the loops. You can also run some infinite loops. For example, if I say I equal to 1, I leave it that, and I say I minus minus. So what happens? I equal to 1, 1 is less than 10. Yes, it goes here, prints the value, and then I decrement the value. I don't increment the value, I decrement the value. So whatever value comes out will always be less than 10, and this loop will run forever. For fun, let's try to run this, and I will have to kill this program manually, but just to show you what happens and what you should not do in your Java program. So you see, it will continuously keep printing the values till the program runs out of memory, till it eats up all the available memory. It is forever running. It will never stop. because the condition will never evaluate to false. This condition will forever be true. So the loop will run forever. So I'm just going to kill the program, but this is something which you should avoid whenever you are writing Java code. And this happens quite often with beginner programmers. Hello guys, and let's get started with enhanced for loops in Java. We generally use the enhanced for loops for scenarios whenever we have to iterate over a collection of items or an array of items. Those are the most popular and common use cases of using enhanced for loop. And this for loop is even simpler. Like I said, it's even simpler than writing a classic for loop. And the syntax is simply like this. You again start with for, put the standard brackets, and then let's start from the rightmost, because then I will be able to explain it better. You specify the collection in the rightmost side of the bracket. The collection can be an array, it can be a list, it can be a map. So whatever different kind of collections which are available in Java, and we are going to cover collections in detail. So don't worry if you don't understand what are lists and what are maps and what are sets. We will go into detail of each of these one by one in the upcoming sessions. But the idea is that you put the collection to the rightmost, then you put a colon, and then you put a representation of the member of this collection. So for example, here this numbers is basically an int array. So this int array means that this array can only hold integer numbers, and that's why we write int here, because this array is only having integers. Then we put any placeholder variable name. This can be anything. You can even write it as I if you want to. You can write it as anything, any variable name which you want to write. This is a temporary variable. So now this code is going to execute in a manner that it is going to iterate over this array one by one, starting from the first element, going till the last element. You don't need to write any initialization code. You don't need to write any termination condition code, and you don't need to write any increment or decrement code also. And how these three values are actually taken care of, let's understand that as well. So when we talk about the initialization, as I have put an array here, a data structure here, the automatic initialization index is going to be the first index. So when we do the iteration, when this for loop is going to execute, it is automatically going to initialize a temporary variable with the value at the first index, which is the index 0. As you know, that array is a 0 index based structure. Then comes the condition part. So the condition evaluation is going to be again based on the size of the array or the size of the data structure which you are using. It is going to start from the first index, which is the index 0, and it is going to iterate till the array's last element is reached. So technically start from the index 0 and go till the last element. That's your evaluation condition. And then comes the increment part. So at each step, after it has successfully accessed the first element, automatically the index is going to be updated to pointing to the next element. So if it starts from here, once the first step iteration is complete, I is automatically going to be incremented to index 1. And then it will basically, this I will be holding 2. Then in the next iteration, the same I is going to be holding 3. Similarly, I will keep holding the new value of the collection item one by one till the collection item's last element is reached. So this is the basic premise, that you can write a collection variable here and keep iterating over it, and this whatever variable you write here will hold the current item's value one by one. So in the first step, this I is going to hold 1. In the second step, this I is going to hold 2. In the third step, this I is going to hold 3, and so on and so forth. That's the basic idea. So now let's run this program to see what kind of output do we get. So you can see we basically are able to print all the elements of the array. And that's probably one of the most popular usage as well, that if you want to just print all the elements or access all the elements of an array or a collection one by one, then just use enhanced for loop. So you can see at each step, it is printing the value of I, and the value of I is basically the subsequent elements of the array. That's the whole idea with enhanced for loop. Under the hoods, if we talk about how does it work under the hood, it is actually using the classic for loop construct itself. But for developers, it is making it easier because it knows that if you are iterating over a collection, you will start with the first element and you will go till the last element. So it knows the initialization value, the termination condition, and it also knows the increment condition. And that's the reason you will use enhanced for loops in Java for iterating over collections. Hello guys, let's get started with nested for loops in Java. So in front of you, you can see an example which I have prepared for nested for loops. And in this particular example, I have created a two-dimensional array. As you can see on the line number 6, I have created an integer array and I have put two square brackets here, which are basically symbolizing that this is a two-dimensional array. So this two-dimensional array is going to hold technically a 2D matrix. And we are going to use the concept of nested for loops to print this 2D array in a 2D matrix style where you will be able to see the rows and columns clearly. Let's first try to interpret this particular 2D array. So we have a curly braces outside, and then we have these three inner elements, which symbolizes three rows basically. So this is the first row, this is the second row, and this is the third row. And then each of the rows have three elements each, which symbolizes the column values or the item values. So it's basically a 3x3 2D array, which has three rows and three columns. So we can say that this is basically a 3x3 array, which has 3 dimensions on the row side and 3 dimensions on the column side, or just a 3x3 matrix or 3x3 2D array. So as we know that in case of arrays, everything starts from 0. So technically, if we talk about the indexes, it would be the index 0, index 1, and index 2 on the row side, and similarly index 0, index 1, and index 2 on the column side. So that's something which you should remember, because we are going to use this particular concept when we write the for loop. So let's try to write the for loop now. If you look at line number 8, we put this keyword called for, and then we write the initialization. So we say int I equal to 0. Then we are writing the termination condition, and we are saying run this particular loop, run this whole loop which ends at line 13 till I is less than 3, and keep incrementing I at every step. That's what I'm doing in the line number 8. Then inside the for loop, I'm writing another for loop which has another different variable called j. It can be anything, you can name it anything you want. And this also starts with 0. And this also has a similar condition which says run this particular loop, the line 10 basically, or this loop which is signified by this curly braces, run this particular loop till the time the value of j is less than 3, and keep incrementing j at every step. And at line number 10, print the element of array which has the current value of I and the current value of j. These are basically the positions. These are not the elements. The element would be represented by this whole, but print the element which is at current I and j's position values. That's what this code means. So let's try to do a dry run on this particular code to understand how this is going to work. So at first we have I equal to 0. 0 is less than 3, and it goes inside. It initializes j as well with 0, and 0 is also less than 3. So this condition went true. That's why we went to line number 9, and line number 9 condition also went to true. So we went to line number 10. Remember that in this particular case at line number 10, the values of I and j are 0 and 0 respectively. And we are saying print the array of 0 and 0. So 0th rows, 0th column element should be printed. So this is the 0th row because this is the first subblock, and this is the first element. So in this case, in line number 10, 2 should get printed. Then it goes here and it increments the j to 1. So 0 plus 1 becomes 1. It again checks the condition, is 1 less than 3? So yes, 1 is less than 3. It goes here. Remember, it did not go up at line number 8. It just came back from line number 9. So when it comes here, I is still 0, but j has moved from 0 to 1. So now we are trying to access the element which is at 0th row first column, which is going to be 7. So 7 is going to get printed. Similarly, on the next iteration, j is going to get incremented from 1 to 2. And again, the condition will be evaluated. So 2 is less than 3. All good. It will again come back to line number 10. And now it will say print the value of 0 row, third or the second column or the third element. So 0th row, third element, which is the 9. So 9 will get printed. Then again j will be incremented and j will become 3. 2 plus 1, 3. And now the condition will be evaluated. Is 3 less than 3? No, it is not less than 3. The condition becomes false. So it breaks out of the loop, goes to line number 12, prints an empty line because we are not writing anything here. So it will just print a blank line. And now it will go back to line number 8's condition and it will do an increment of I. And now I will move from 0 to 1. And now the evaluation will happen. Is 1 less than 3? Yes, 1 is less than 3. So it will again go to line number 9. Again, initialize j with a fresh 0. The previous j got destroyed the moment you came out of the loop. So this is a new j. So this j again gets initialized to 0. 0 is less than 3. It goes here. Remember, I was 1 in this time. So now it will print the value of this 2D array, which is sitting at 1, 0. Basically second row, first element. So second row, first element, which is 3. Again, j is going to get incremented and it will become from 0 to 1. So 1 is less than 3. Yes, it will again come here and it will print the value of the array, which is sitting at array of 1, 1 for a row equal to 1 and column equal to 1, which will be 6. Similarly, j will get incremented again. Again, 2 is less than 3. Come back here, we'll print 1. Then again, we'll increment j. J will become 3. 3 is less than 3. No, it's false. The condition is false. So it jumps out of the loop, goes to line number 12, prints a blank line, again goes back to 8, line number 8, increments I, and I now becomes 2. 2 is less than 3. Yes, it will again go here, initialize j again with 0, and again does the same thing for the row 2 and column 0, 1, 2. And again, it will come out of the loop. This time, again, when it will go here, the value will become from 2 to 3, and 3 is not less than 3. So then it will break out of the outer loop. So the idea is execute the inner loop for every value of the outer loop. Remember this line because that is how you will be applying your knowledge of nested for loops to be used in certain condition. So whenever you have a scenario where you have to iterate over a collection based on a certain value of another collection, then you can use nested for loops. Or you have a scenario where you have to iterate over 2D or 3D arrays. For example, if we were dealing with 3D arrays, then you would have seen 3 nested for loops here, and where it will apply the same logic that iterate over all the collections, all the values of the inner loop on a particular value of the outer loop. Then increment the value of the outer loop and do the same thing again. Iterate over all the values of the inner loop based on a fixed value of the outer loop. So let's run this program and let's see what kind of output do we get. So like I said, our motive, our target was to print this in a matrix style. And you can see that it is printing in a sort of a matrix representation. So the first row gets printed here, then the second row gets printed here, and then the third row gets printed here. If you try to decipher it, it will work exactly the same way as I explained. So I equal to 0, 0 less than 3, condition becomes true, comes here, j equal to 0, j less than 3, condition becomes true, comes here, prints the array of 0, 0, which is 2, then prints the array of 0, 1, which is 7, 0, 2, which is 9, then j becomes 3, it breaks out of the loop, goes up here, I becomes from 0 to 1, 1 is less than 3, yes, again comes here, reinitializes a fresh for loop with a new j setting to 0, and it will print the array of 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, then similarly array of 2, 0, 2, 1, 2, 2. So that's basically what we are doing. We are iterating, we are picking the first row and iterating all elements of it, picking the second row, iterating all elements over it, and so on and so forth. You can do this for any n-dimensional kind of array or a collection.
So iterative statements or looping statements, we can say, are used when we want to perform an activity multiple times or n number of times. So we don't have to copy paste that code every time, but we can use iterative statements. Using iterative statements will make our code clean and definitely more efficient. So we have 4 different types of iterative control statements, right? We discussed it in the previous video. Let's move on to for loop, which is our first iterative control statement, and we'll move on to the programming part directly. So before we start, one thing to keep in mind, guys, is that we use for loop when we are clear with the number of iterations in advance. So let's start with our first program. In this program, we will print the multiplication table of 10 from 10 into 1 to 10 into 10. Let's start with coding. First we write the for keyword, and then we have 3 different parts. We have the initialization, which is separated by a semicolon. Next up we have the condition, and finally we have the increment or decrement. So this is the syntax for loop. Next up we have the open and the closed curly braces for the body of for loop. We'll change these 3 values, as these are not the actual values, right? Our parameters for these 3 different parts of the loop are going to be different. So let me comment this one. So what we'll do, we'll leave it here only. We'll change it from here. So in the initialization part, what we are going to do is we'll create a variable. Let's say we are creating a variable where a and the initial value of a will be 1. This initialization happens only one time when the for loop begins. We have to be careful about the condition we are going to use, because sometimes what happens is the loop runs forever because of a wrong condition, which will ultimately crash our program. So in the condition, what we have to do is we have to give a value as in for how long our for loop should execute. Here in this case, we want to print the table of 10, right? We want to have 10 iterations. So what it will do, it will start from a equals to 1 and it will go till this final condition. So let's suppose we are writing here a less than equals to 10. It will start from a equals to 1 and it will go till a less than or equals to 10. And next up we'll use the increment operator. We want to increment the value of a by 1 every time, right? So we'll use increment operator, a plus plus, or we can say a equals to a plus 1. Both are the same things, right? So here the condition will be like this: for variable a equals to 1, a less than equals to 10 and a plus plus. So here you can see the loop will execute from a equals to 1 till a equals to 10, and the value will be increased by 1 every time because we have used the increment operator, right? Next up, the body of for loop will go like, so what we want to print here, we want to print the table of 10, right? So we'll use document dot write, and inside document dot write we'll use the h1 tag. So what we want to do is we want to print the table of 10, right? So we'll multiply 10 by a. For every iteration the value of a will be multiplied by 10 and then it will be printed on the browser. So we'll close the h1 tag here in the semicolon. So here you can see we have printed 10 into a. Let's save it and check the output first, and then we'll look at the execution flow of this program. See, here the multiplication table of 10 is printed on the browser. You can see 10, 20, 30, 40, so on and so forth till 100. So what is happening is, firstly, the for loop is also known as the entry control loop. It means that the condition is checked initially. The first time the for loop runs, we perform initialization only once. So here the value stored at variable a is 1. Initially the value is 1. Next up it will check for a less than equals to 10. Is a, which is 1, is 1 less than equals to 10? Then true. The control will be shifted to document.write and it will print 10 into the value of a is 1, right? So it will print 10 here. Next thing, it will go for the increment and the value of a will be changed to 2 from 1. 1 plus 1, or we can say 1 equals to 1 plus 1, right? So it will be 2. Now next thing, it will leave this now because the initialization happens only once. Now it will go for the condition directly. Now it will check for is 2 less than or equals to 10. If yes, then again the control will be shifted here and it will print 10 into 2 because the value of a is 2 now. And after that it will print 20 here, and after that the value of a will be increased to 3 because we have used a++. Then it will check for 3 is 3 less than 10, and same thing will happen, it will print 30, and so on and so forth till the value of a is 10. Now if the value of a is 10, it will print 100, right? And when the value is incremented, it will become 11. So what will happen? Now it will check for 11 less than equals to 10. No, we know that 11 is not less than equal to 10, right? Then it comes out of the loop and it will print nothing after that. So this is the basic working of the for loop. We'll go through one more program wherein we'll print the odd numbers between 1 and 10. So what are odd numbers? Odd numbers are those numbers which are not divisible by 2, right? So we have the odd numbers as 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and we want to print them. So the difference between each number is of 2. The 1 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 till 9, right? So what we have to do is we have to write here a plus equals to 2. We have to increase the value of a by 2. And instead of writing here 10 into a, because this time we don't want to print any multiplication table, we want to print a number only, right? So we'll use a only. Save it and check the output. It says 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So these are the odd numbers present between 1 and 10. Keep one thing in mind, that you have to give the condition wisely every time. So next up we have the while loop. Like the for loop, while loop is also an entry control loop, which means that the condition will be checked first. So the question here is how while loop is different from the for loop. If you guys remember, when we discussed that we must know the exact number of iterations, then only we can use the for loop, right? So the while loop is preferred when we are not aware of the number of iterations, or we can say we don't know if the condition will be true for a certain number of times. We'll start with the programming part now, and then we will discuss more about when to use while loop over for loop. So let's start with the program. In this particular program, we will print odd numbers up to a specific number. Let's say we want to print all the odd numbers up to 50. So we want to print all the odd numbers from 1 till 50, right? We came across the same program in the previous video as well, but this time we will use the while loop instead of for loop. So the syntax for the while loop is relatively easy to use. The code goes like, we start with the while keyword, then opening and closing round brackets, and finally the body of while loop in curly braces. If you guys remember from the previous video wherein we used the for loop, we had 3 different parts, right? We had the initialization, we had conditions, and the increment decrement part. Here we have only one condition, and until this condition holds true, the while loop will be executed. For example, here we want to print all the odd numbers from 1 to 50, right? So we'll first initialize a variable. Let's initialize a variable first. Let's say we have a variable x and the value of x will be 1. We used here 1 because 1 is the very first odd number, right? After that, inside the condition, what we want to do is we want to print the odd numbers up to 50. So while the condition will be like while x less than equals to 50. So the loop will go till x is less than or equals to 50. Or we can say x less than 50. That depends on us if we want to check for 50 or not. So the odd numbers will go like 1, and then we have 3, then we have 5, then we have 7, and up to 50. So the last odd number will be 49. So inside the while loop, we will print the value of x. So here we will print the value of x. Let's print it. Document.write. And inside this we will print the value of x inside the h1 tag. Suppose we try to run this program now. It will go on an infinite loop, and the reason for this is we are not doing anything to increment the value of x. Just like in for loop, if you remember, we had the initialization first. We had the initialization here as well. Then we had the condition. we have a condition here as well, and then finally it has an increment or decrement part, right? So here we don't have that same increment or decrement part, we have to do it separately. So we'll increment the value of x here only. So here we will write x plus equals to 2, or we can say it is same as x equals to x plus 2. You guys are aware of it, right? So the reason is simple, because we want to go from 1 to 3 to 5 and so on. That's why we use x plus equals to 2. We incremented the value of x by 2. Save it here and let's check the output. So here you can see it says 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 and so on and so forth till 49. So 49 is the last odd number before 50, because we are checking between 1 and 50, right? So 49 is the last odd number. Let me show you how the program goes into an infinite loop. So for that, what we have to do, we will comment this whole line here. Let's check the output now, save it, and here you can see it is refreshing forever. And this is basically how a program in an infinite loop looks like. The output of this program is the program will ultimately crash. So what we have to do, we have to open a new tab and then again we have to run the program with correct increment part. So here you can see, you can wait for it to become responsive or exit the page. So here you can see we have all the odd numbers from 1 up to 50 and the last one is 49. Coming back to the difference between the while loop and the for loop. We did the same program previously, right? Using the for loop. So where to use while loop over for loop? So consider a scenario where we are taking input from the user and the input from the user is y. We want to do something. Let's say we want to print something on the screen. Or if the input from the user is n, we want the process to be stopped. We can give the condition in the while loop, which will go like when the character y becomes n, the process will be stopped. We'll go through one such program once we are done with the DOM manipulation part, wherein we take the input from the user. Let's move on to the do while loop in JavaScript. In the previous videos, we have already discussed that both for loop and the while loop are entry control loop. That means the conditions are checked first, right? But the do while loop is a bit different, or we can say it is an exit control loop, wherein the condition is checked after the execution of the loop's body. Thus, an exit control loop executes at least once. Even if the test condition fails, or we can say the condition is wrong, the loop will execute once. Using the do while loop is relatively easy. It seems like we are giving the system a command to do something while the condition is something. So let's start with the syntax now. The syntax goes like this. We write the keyword do and we have a pair of curly braces for the body of the loop. And after that we have the while keyword and here we will write the condition. Make sure you are using the semicolon after the while loop. It's necessary while using do while loop. Keep this thing in mind. So we have two parts in the do while loop, the do part and the while part, or we can say the condition part. While part is the part where we write the condition. So let's define a variable first. Let's say we are using a variable. We are using a variable x and the value of x will be 5. So here we have taken 5 as a random value. You can take 1 as well. Now inside the condition part of the do while loop, this is the condition part where we are using the while keyword. So we'll give a condition. Let's say we are using while x greater than 5. It will check for the condition that if the value of x is greater than 5 or if the value of x is smaller than or equal to 5, it will come out of the loop. In the do part, we will write what we want to do. Let's say we want to print a single sentence here. We write document.write and whatever sentence we want to write. Let's say we are using welcome to SimpliCode. So here you might be thinking that the condition is false, but the condition will be checked after the first iteration in the do while loop. So no matter what the condition is, the first iteration will happen always. So if we try to save this program and let's try to run this. Here you can see the output is welcome to SimpliCode. A single line is printed. What is happening here is, although the condition we used was wrong, but the condition will be checked only after the first iteration. When the do while loop will perform this particular statement, when the document.write will be performed, after that it will check for the condition if x is greater than 5 or not. If we use here 6 instead of 5, Let's try to write here 6 instead of 5. And if we run this program now, it will go into an infinite loop because we are not performing the increment decrement operator here, right? As we have discussed in the previous videos, the importance of increment decrement part. So we need to do it here after the document.write part. So what we'll do here, we'll write x minus minus. Today we are using x minus minus, and for the other two loops we use the plus increment operator, right? So the x minus minus is the same as x equals to x minus 1. Let's check the output now. Save it. Here you can see the output is still welcome to SimpliCode. The execution flow of this program will be like, it will first perform the iteration before checking the condition, and it will print here welcome to SimpliCode for the first time. When the loop will start executing, it will first perform this statement and it will write here welcome to SimpliCode. So then it will perform x minus minus, means the value of x is now 5 because we are decrementing the value by 1. So when the value of x is 5, then it will check for the condition if x is greater than 5 or not. So here we can see clearly x is not greater than 5 because x equals to 5 and it is equals to 5, right? So it will come out of the loop. Let's make few changes in the code here. Suppose we use here 10 instead of 6 now. And let's print the value of x as well. It will be easy for you to understand. So we'll print here x and we'll use a space so that it will be clear for you. We'll use here the br tag, and now let's try to run this program. Here you can see the output goes from 10 to 6 and it prints welcome to SimpliCode every time, right? If you guys are wondering where we use the do while loop, sometimes it may happen that even though the condition is false, but we have to execute that command. We use the do while loop when we want the code to output some sort of menu to the user, or to generate the menu at least once. We'll get to know about the do while loop in future videos when we create a program specifically for the do while loop. This video is just a syntax demonstration. We'll go through the examples of all the 3 loops present in JavaScript. So today we have 3 different problems for 3 separate loops, right? We'll go through each of the problems and we'll discuss the execution flow for each loop we'll go through. So let's start this session with the first problem statement. So the first problem statement goes like this. So here we have to write a program to check whether a number is prime or not. I hope you guys are aware of what prime numbers are, right? So a prime number is a positive number that is only divisible by 1 and itself. For example, 2, 3, 5, and we have 7 and 11. These are the first few prime numbers, right? If we take an example, let's say we are taking an example of 7. So 7 is a number which is divisible by 1 and 7 only. No other number can divide 7, right? So here in this code, we have to check whether a number is prime or not. So let me take you through the code. So here is the code to check whether a number is a prime number or not. Let me take you through this first. So we have a variable number, and the value of variable number can be any random value, like any number you want to check if the number is prime number or not. You can give that value to the variable number. So here we have taken 83. Next up we have a variable is prime, whose value is a boolean value, right? It can be true for a prime number or it can be false for a non-prime number. So we have used comments in this program to make it easier for you guys to understand. So here we have used the if statement to check if the number is 1, because we know that 1 is neither a prime number nor a composite number, right? So we have to check if the user enters the value 1, or if we are giving the value 1, we have to check for it. So if user enters the value 1, it will print this statement that 1 is neither prime nor composite. Here in else if, we are checking if the value of number is greater than 1 or not. So if the value of number is greater than 1, the control will be shifted to for loop present inside the else if statement, right? Here you can see we have the for loop here. The control will be shifted to this for loop. So here you can see we have initialized a variable I, and the initial value is set to 2. That's because any prime number is divisible by 1 as well, right? So it won't make any sense to include 1 here. We'll start from 2 and we'll check until the value of I becomes half of the value of number. So if we take an example of 10, will check until 5, because any number greater than 5 won't divide 10, right? It's practically not possible. So we'll check for number by 2, or we can say we'll check till 5 only, and the value will be increased by 1 every time. Till now I hope you guys are aware of how to use for loop and why we are using for loop here. We can do the same program using while loop as well, but to make it more clear how to use for loop, we are doing this program with the help of for loop. So then we have the I++, or we can say we have increased the value of I by 1 after every iteration until the value of I becomes half of the number. So the condition number %I equals to 0. So here is the main condition to check if the number is divisible by I or not. So the execution will be like, if we are taking here a number 10, it will start from 2 and it will check if the remainder is 0 or not. So if the remainder is 0, then the value of is prime will be changed to false and it will come out of the loop. Next, it will check for the value of is prime if the value of is prime is true or not. Here you can see if the value of is prime is true, then it will print n, or we can say then it will print that the number is a prime number, else it will print that the number is not a prime number if the value of is prime is false. For example, when we took the example of number as 10, so the value of is prime will be changed to false, because 10 divides by 2 is equals to 0, or we can say the remainder will be 0. So the value of is prime will be changed to false, and for false it will print number is not a prime number. So at last we will check if the number is less than 1. If the number entered by the user or any other number we have taken, like if we take here -5, so it will print the number is not a prime number, because by the usual definition of prime numbers, any negative number cannot be a prime number. That's a usual definition, right? So we have to keep this thing in mind, and here in this else loop we'll print that if any negative number is entered, we'll make sure that the program gives the output that the number is not a prime number. So let's try to run this program and check the output. Let's save this program, and the output says 83 is a prime number, as 83 is not divisible by any number except 1 and 83. For example, if we take here any number which is divisible by, so let's say we are taking 75. Save it now and see, it says 75 is not a prime number. Okay, here's a spelling mistake. It says 75 is a not prime number. So here we'll correct this. So we are done with it and save it now. Now it says 75 is not a prime number, as 75 is divisible by numbers other than 1 and itself, right? It is divisible by 3, it is divisible by 5, 15 and 25 as well. All these numbers divide 75 basically. So let's take a different value here. Let's say we are taking -7. Let's change the value here as, or we can take it as -75. Let's save it now. So it says the number is not a prime number. Or if we want to try for 1 as well, let's take it as 1. And let's check the output now. So it says 1 is neither prime nor composite number, because we have given here the condition if number is equals to 1, then it will print that 1 is neither a prime nor a composite number. You can try this program with the help of other loops as well. So let's move on to the second problem statement, but before that let me take you through the same program using the while loop. So here you can see we have used the while loop for the same instead of for loop. Here you can see we have used while I less than number by 2, and we have given the increment condition here, and we have initialized the value of I at the start of the program. So if we try to run this program, it will give us the same output. There will be no change in the output. So we can use while loop as well. So we'll use the while loop in other program. Let's move on to the second problem statement. So in this example, we'll learn to write a program in JavaScript to check whether a number is an Armstrong number or not. So we'll do this with the help of while loop. Let's have a look at how to implement this program. Before proceeding to the coding part, let's have a look at what is an Armstrong number. So an Armstrong number of 3 digits is an integer such that the sum of the cubes of its digits is equal to the number itself. So for example, 153 is an Armstrong number. Since 1 into 1 into 1, it means the cube of the digit 1 plus the cube of 5, that is 5 into 5 into 5, which is equal to 125, and the cube of 3, which is 3 3s are 9 and 9 3s are 27. So it will go like 125 plus 27 plus 1. So which is equal to 153. So an Armstrong number of 3 digits is an integer such that the sum of the cubes of its digits is equal to the number itself. So here we have the code for the same. This is the code to check whether the number is an Armstrong number or not. So here we have taken a variable and the value is 153. The value of the variable number is 153, right? Because we already know that 153 is an Armstrong number. There are few more numbers like 371 is also an Armstrong number. Next up, we have taken a variable sum and the initial value of sum is 0. We have used the variable sum to store the value of the cubes. And next up, we have a temporary variable so that we can break a 3-digit number, and we need the number after all this program, all these loops and all, will need the number, will need the original number to compare it with the sum of the cubes, which will be held in sum. So, but we need to break the number as well, right? So we need a temporary variable to break it. Here we use the while loop, and the loop will run until the value of variable temp is greater than 0. So the initial value of temp will be 153 here. In this particular case, the initial value will be 153, and the loop will run until the value of 153 is greater than 0. Next up, we have a variable remainder that stores the last digit's value as we are dividing 153 by 10. So the remainder here will be 3. So the value saved at variable remainder will be 3 for the first time. Then what will happen will we are updating the value of sum, and the new value of sum will be 0 plus 3 into 3 into 3. So 3 3s are 9 and 9 3s are 27. So the updated value of sum will be 27. Next up, we are removing the last digit from the number. So for example, we have here 153, and if we divide 153 by 10, the answer will be 15.3. That's why we are using here %, because what % will do, it will convert the float value into an integer. So if we try to perform a simple divide in JavaScript, like if we try to divide 153 by 10, it will give us 15.3. It will give us a float value, but we want an integer value, right? So % will change this value to the nearest integer. So 15.3, the nearest integer will be 15. So the new value of temp will be 15. Then again this loop will be executed, and for this time the variable remainder will hold the value of 15 modulus 10, and the remainder will be 5, right? So the new value of remainder is 5, and the value of sum is 27 plus 5 into 5 into 5, which is 27 plus 125, right? So the new value of sum will be 152. And then again it will go to the temp and it will divide 15 by 10, and it will change the value to an integer. So 1.5 will be changed to 1. And next up, the final value of temp is 1, which is greater than 0, right? So it will divide 10 by 1 and the remainder will be 1. So next up, it will add 152 plus 1 into 1 into 1, that is 153, right? And then it will divide 1 by 10 using the %, but this time the value will be 0 because there's no remainder, right? Next up, we'll compare the value of the sum and the number variable. So the sum variable here, it is holding the value as 153. We break this number into 3 different parts. Then we took the cube of these 3 numbers and added them. So the final value of the variable sum is 153, and the initial value of number, or we can say the value we gave to the variable number, is 153. So right, it will print here that 153 is an Armstrong number. Or if we use any other number instead of 153, let's suppose we are using 121. So it will print 121 is not an Armstrong number. Let's check out the output once. Let's save it and see the output here is 153 is an Armstrong number. So if we change the value of 153 to 121. So let's check the output now. It says 121 is not an Armstrong number. Why? Because if we take the cube of each of the digit and we'll add them, suppose the answer here will be 10, because the cube of 1 is 1 and the cube of 2 is 8 and the cube of the final one is 1. So 8 plus 1 plus 1 is equals to 10. So that's why 121 is not an Armstrong number. Let's move on to our last problem statement, where we'll use the do while loop to find the factorial of a number. So here's the problem statement where we'll have to write a program to find the factorial of a number. So factorial of an integer is the product of an integer and all the integers below it, or we can say before it till 1. So if we take an example of 5, so the factorial of 5 will be, it will multiply each number before it. If we take 5, the factorial will be 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1. Or if we don't include 1, that's totally fine. So this program is pretty simple as compared to the previous two we did. So this is a small one too. Let me take you through this. So here we have the program. And here we have three variables, right? We have a variable I, which is initialized as 1. Then we have a variable n, which is 5. And then we have a variable f, whose value is 1. F is for factorial and n is for number we want to check the factorial of, and I is for checking the condition. So here what we will do, we'll use a loop where if we, for example, if we are taking 5, then the loop will go from 1 into 2 into 3 into 4 into 5 from 1 to that number. It's not like if we are using from 5 towards 1, but we are going from 1 towards 5. The answer will be same, right? Because we are multiplying all the numbers in both the cases. So here we took 5 as the number. Next up we have a variable f and the value of f is also 1, as you know. So here we are using the do while loop. For the first iteration it will perform this. So the value of f for the first iteration will be f equals to f into I, which means f equals to 1 into 1, which is 1. So the value of I will be increased and it will become 2. And now it will check for while 2 is less than equals to n. Yes, 2 is less than n. So it will again go up and it will update the value of f, and the new value of f will be 1 into 2, that is 2. Then again the value will be increased and it will become 3, and then it will change the value of f as well. If it will become 6 and the value of I will become 4, then it will check if 4 is less than 5. Yes, 4 is less than 5. And then it will multiply 4 with 6 because the value of f was 6, right? So 4 into 6, it will become 24. And then finally the value of I will be 5. And it will check if the value of I is less than or equals to 5, right? While I is less than equals to 5. Yes, that's true, because now 5 is equals to 5. And it will again execute the loop and the value of f will be 24 into 5, which is 120. And then again the value of I will be increased. Now it will become 6, which is greater than 5. So it will come out of the loop and it will print the factorial of a number. So let's save this program. So the factorial of 5 is 120. Because see, here we have used the factorial of n. N is 5 and the factorial is 120. So if we try to give any other number here other than 5, let's say we are using here 10. Save it. It says the factorial is 3628800.
And with that, we have come to the end of this tutorial. If you guys feel that we have missed out on some important topics that we were supposed to cover in this tutorial, then please feel free to drop them down in the comment section below and we'll have your questions answered. If you guys like this video, then do give it a thumbs up. Please comment your doubts below, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe SimpliCode. Thank you.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.